think that we're only dealing with these gender issues now, and here we are in 2025, and that it's kind of new. It was big at the UN in 1995. And so they were at that time working towards to get language and documents that included a gender perspective.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Currents, a podcast by Big Ocean Women. Big Ocean Women is the world's leading feminist organization, and today we're going to talk about some things concerning our global strategy team, some events that we've been to recently, and our thoughts. These are really important things to talk about. My name is Grace Raje. I am on the global strategy team with Big Ocean. I've been with Big Ocean for 8 years, and I absolutely love it. We also have Carolina Allen, the founder of Big Ocean Women, on this conversation.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
And we have Susan Roylance. And Susan, her resume dates far before Big Ocean, and she's been a mentor to us as we've gotten involved in the pro-family advocacy space, especially on the international scale. Susan has been going at this for 30 years. She started the United Families International organization in 1978. She was a candidate for U.S. Congress in Washington State, and she has been involved in the pro-family movement since the beginning, essentially. So we're really excited to hear from Susan today. Another huge accomplishment that Susan has done is she has written a lot. There's a lot of literature that Susan has published about her experiences, which is just such a blessing for those of us following after her. Her most recent book is called 1995 to 2025, Beijing Going Forward, and it's about promoting family and motherhood at the Fourth World Conference on Women. So, Susan, I want to talk to you and just get some inside information on why you felt inspired to write this book and what was the main message that you wanted your readers to get from it.
Well, I've had a lot of people ask me to kind of give an overview from what I've seen in the last 30 years from the time I went to Beijing. And for my involvement internationally and with international fora, it started in Beijing. And I don't know, one morning I woke up and quite honestly, I just felt like I needed to get this book written and it was urgent. And I didn't know really why it was urgent, but I really went for it. And I could have spent more time on some things, but it was urgent because I needed to take it to CSW last year. And because that was the 30-year anniversary of the Beijing conference. And there were just a lot of things that it helped that I had a book that I could say, this is my experience. And so that's why I wrote it. And I felt like there was a need to, there's a lot of water under the bridge since 1995. And I felt like it was important to give that background for people to know what's happened and where we are today.
Absolutely. So, just for the audience, tell us about the Beijing Conference. What is that? Why is that important in the family movement?
The Beijing Conference was in 1995. It's the United Nations Conference. It's the Fourth World Conference on Women. And fourth, obviously, there were three before that. In fact, I remember the one when I lived in Washington State, which had quite an impact on the women's movement at that time. But I was invited to go to New York in the PrepCom for the Beijing Conference, and I really didn't have the money to go, and I said that, but I won't go into all the details, but some things happened that I was able to be there, and when I got there, I was pulled into a room, what was called the Linkage Caucus, which kind of linked the previous conferences. And while I was there, a woman came bursting through the door, and she said they have just bracketed the word gender throughout the document. Now, bracketing, they bracket words where they don't agree. There's a disagreement, and so they're supposed to come to consensus on everything they work on. And the reason she bracketed it, this was the woman from Honduras, and the reason she did this is because they translated it into Spanish, and when the secretariat looked at it, it said male and female. And she says, oh, no, that's not what it means. And Marta Costco, who is from Honduras, said, well, what does it mean? And she kind of hemmed and hawed around. So she bracketed it until they could get a definition for the word gender. And that put everybody in an uproar because people think that we're only dealing with these gender issues now, and here we are in 2025, and that it's kind of new. It was big at the UN in 1995. And so they were at that time working towards to get language and documents that included a gender perspective. Not so much trans at that time, but it was a gender perspective from the LGBT. At that time it was just Q. Now it's Q and an I and a plus, all of those things. But anyway, so the room kind of was all concerned, and then they said, "We need to find out who's in this room." And so they had everybody stand and introduce themselves. My pro family friends left the room, but I stayed. And so after they'd done this and they started talking again, I says, "Can I say something?" And Bella Abseg, that was in charge at that time, said, "Sure." So I said, "I don't understand why you can't be for the advancement of women and for families too, because this kind of had come up." And a woman turned around. She says, "Well, do you believe in choice?" And I said, "Yes, I believe in choice, but I would never choose an abortion." And then somebody turned around and asked me about if I believed that lesbians could be mothers. And I said, "Well, as far as I know, there's only one way you can become a mother, and I'm for that." Anyway, I left the room, and and I should tell you, I guess I better figure out my story if I'm going to tell this. But I said I was Susan Roylance from United Families of America. It was America at the time, not international. And the room broke into laughter and jeers. And it was very shocking to me to have that experience. And anyway, as time went on, Marta Costco was severely bullied and pressured to take those brackets off. And actually, we have all this USAID concerns today. It was USAID that did that to her. And they told her, from the US, they told her if she didn't take those brackets off, all the humanitarian aid to Honduras would be. And she called her president and asked him what he wanted her to do. And he says, "You hang in there." But the pressure was intense that was put on her, and she got sick. And I was kind of involved with the people that were with her. Christine Vollmer was knew her, and anyway, she kind of enfolded us all together in the group. And when I came home, I was standing in my kitchen and looking out the window at the Wasatch Mountains, and I said to myself, "I don't have to worry about this stuff. I live in a great state, and we're not perfect. The legislature's not perfect, but they're good. We have a good governor." And a voice said to me, "If you, who have nothing to lose, don't do something, who can?" Because she couldn't, and she did not go to Beijing. It was just the pressure was so great. And so I decided to get involved, and that's when I decided that I would go to Beijing. I never thought I would do that, but we organized it with Utah Association of Women is the organization that we did it under at that time, and United Families, but we used Utah Association of Women. We raised money and all of those things. And just the whole process of going there, my purpose was to promote motherhood and to help people who are working on that document to realize that mothers are very important. Yes, you want to have empowerment of women, but empowering her as a mother is as important or more important than anything else. So we had we had a petition that we sent to Hillary Clinton because she was the head of the U.S. delegation at that time. She was the president's wife, but she was physically the head. And people told me that she actually wrote a lot of the Beijing Platform for Action. Anyway, we had a petition that we wrote to her, and we wanted to have inserted the recognition of motherhood. And when we went to the conference in Beijing, there was 3 weeks or 2 weeks that was a forum, and then there was 1 week that was the actual conference. I mean, we don't do things that long nowadays. But we had a booth. It was a really nice booth. We had several things in it that we were giving out to people, and some CDs and different things about families and mothers. Anyway, we had this petition that people could come and sign, and women would come and they would just cry. They were so grateful. They just loved their mothers and they wanted us to represent mothers. And then we had the conference. And anyway, that's my beginning with Beijing.
To give a little context, thanks so much, Susan. I think that your voice is really powerful. I just wanted to give a little bit of context of how important you are in all of this. Everything that's hitting us here at home related to families, motherhood, gender identity, everything is hitting its full force, but it was really designed at the United Nations conferences. And anything related to women, more specifically, was had at this 1995 conference in Beijing. And like it so much so that we revisit it every year. There's some element from that Beijing conference that the Commission on the Status of Women, or CSW, in New York City is a major conference. And so if you think of it as like the mecca of feminists throughout the world pushing their ideas and agenda, like you mentioned these names like Bella Abzug, like these are fixture people in the entire movement. And you, Susan Roylance, were there. You were a part of that, and you have held the ground for motherhood all these years. And that's why I want every listener to understand the scope of who you are, and what you mean to us as maternal feminists, because you are one of those key maternal feminists back in the day that was laughed at in a room full of women, and you stood your ground. And I want every listener to understand what an honor and a privilege it is to hear Susan Roylance's story, and to understand this, like what we're really dealing with here, because 35 years later, here we are, and the family has disintegrated, and people are wondering, how did this happen? What happened, and what can we do about it? Well, it was orchestrated, and Susan saw it with her own eyes. And when we talk about Susan being an author, I just want to share that she wrote the Bible, so to speak, on language and how we can protect it at the United Nations. She wrote it. It's a big, thick black book, and the name of it is the
UN Negotiating Guide.
yeah, the UN Negotiating Guide. So it's like all of
Need
these.
to show it. I have one.
Yeah, go grab it and show it. The negotiating guide is used by countries and all of their diplomats and presidents and people that are negotiating the language that will eventually trickle down and impact you at the very local level. And so Susan created that so that they had a guidebook, and so that we could even understand what all of this language was about. Everything that you're seeing ideologically on the ground, it starts at the language level. And so for people that are negotiating language to have something, this is what she wrote. Look at this, the size of this monster. It's amazing. She wrote that. She is truly a hero in our eyes at Big Ocean Women. We're so proud to have her as such an incredible mentor of our Global Strategy Committee. And that she's a part of Big Ocean Women is probably one of the greatest honors we have. Anyway, I just had to share a little bit about you, Susan, and what you mean to us, so
Thank
that the
you.
listeners can
I think I should
understand.
also comment that for a lot of years, most of the people that knew me didn't even know I was doing this because everybody thought I was crazy.
Isn't that how it goes?
Anybody that would want to go to the United Nations. Well, I know as well as anybody the reasons why going to the United Nations seems crazy, but that's why we needed to be there. So
Yeah.
it's been interesting, the process, the process. I have to tell you, today is an absolutely amazing day, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but today at the UN is the HLPF, High Level Political Forum, and they just completed the acceptance of the HLPF ministerial declaration. And the first time in 30 years that we've had a country who really spoke up for family and for women and for life, and that was the US. And there was only two that in the final thing rejected the document that they had, but the US did. And after that, everybody was able to give and I don't know that you want to say this, but have me even get into this, but they were able to give their reservations. Now, at the end of the document at Beijing, that's what they did. And countries, in my book, I even have those reservations to help show what different countries said. Well, today was momentous in that regard, and it will be a part of the actual document. Many countries came forward and said that they didn't take sexual and reproductive rights, and because it includes abortion, and they didn't take a lot of the document, the language that we've been concerned about, that they didn't accept that, and it was a great, really and truly, it's an amazing experience.
It's an amazing experience when you can see it full circle, where you experienced it with your own eyes, with your own ears, with your own emotions, seeing, the brave people, the very few that were staying in these small little countries that had everything to lose, like you said, all of their aid funding into their country if they didn't toe the line ideologically, and now come full circle 35 years later, to have
It's 30 years.
30 years later to have a country as large and as powerful as the United States, perhaps, share that we aren't on board completely with all of the different things that are trying to be passed under the table, so to speak, because they get linked to other good things. And so it's becomes really complicated and frustrating to move anything forward. But I think it is, like you said, it's a joyous occasion when the world can start teasing things apart and understanding, wait a second, like, what does this actually mean for us? What outcomes will this have on the rising generation if we implement these kind of ideas and language? And the beautiful thing I see that you do, Susan, is that, and Big Ocean Women, is that there's a lot of mothers out there that are doing the jobs within the walls of their home, day in and day out, caring for children, nurturing their hearts and their souls and their minds, teaching them values and virtues. And you're doing this work, but what's really important that you realize is that there are frontline individuals and organizations that are not only standing with you, because we're in the trenches as well, but we're extending ourselves and stretching ourselves to be aware of the latest trending language and ideological pushes so that we can inform you at home so you can be more intentional in how you educate your children and your family and what you use your time doing. And it's a huge privilege to be part of that, a frontline organization, and to be associated with such incredible frontline individuals such as yourself, Susan. But I think it's important. We want to let more people know that this is happening. I think it's important that women around the world know that they're not alone, that the values that they hold dear, that the way that they value their families and the way that they're sacrificing for their children, the rising generation, is not unseen, number one. And number two, the threats are so more pernicious than you can even imagine. And it's critical that we kind of step in together and band together
Yeah,
on this.
definitely. It's critical. And it's so, for me, it's just absolutely heartwarming that there's you and so many. Now there's many women. I'm the one who really started it from the pro-family people within my culture, etc. And now there's many. So I don't feel like I'm old now, so it's kind of difficult to go. But I don't feel like I have to be there because there's so many other people like you that understand and are trained, and you can go and do wonderful things.
Well, you've mentored us, and I don't think there's anybody that knows as much as you do still. But it's just a lifetime of learning, I think. But we're just so honored and grateful for all that you've done, truly.
I appreciate that.
I was able to be personally mentored by Susan last year, and I was impressed by a few things. There's very few people, I feel like, especially in this international arena, that can have the grit to stay when everybody else in the room is laughing at you and pretty much asking you to leave or pushing you out, and then to turn around and have the softness and the generosity to give back to these other organizations like Big Ocean Women and to continue talking about it. One thing I love about Susan is that every time she goes to a UN meeting, she's like, this is my last one. This is my last one. And then a few months later, she'll be like, Grace, do you want to come with me? I'm going to another UN meeting. Like she keeps going. She has the grit and the generosity and the softness and the ability to articulate everything.
When I was young, I was I was a young voice, and
Mhm.
so I had a lot more. They would listen to me more. When you're old, it's like you're a has been, and so they don't listen as much. And that is really true. I don't, and so to have you,
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. I think it should be the other way around. I think we're making a huge mistake. Like the summit of the future is just holding up the youth as this rising generation to this huge elevated position, but without a life lived and really deep lessons learned. Um, that we are taking the older generations for granted and we are losing so much. Like we're not moving forward very intentionally, in my opinion, when we discount the voice of our grandmothers and grandfathers.
I think turning it over to young people is really wrong. And they're doing that because they're training them to do what they think they should do. And the young people are excited that they get invited to come to the UN and all of that. But uh, um, having someone like you who have been trained and you know what we're trying to do, your voice really resonates and people will listen to you because you're not old. It's like you're modern, you understand. And so your voice is very powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that so much of my generation is just missing the context of what's happening. Like like we've already said a few times on this episode, so much of this like just rhetoric, feminist rhetoric, but even just like rhetoric in the activist world, like my generation, we think we're coining this and we're not. Like Susan was debating over these words in 95. Like, truly, none of these are new ideas. And that's so important to understand, like, the gravity behind every single word that we're saying, behind every phrase that we think we're just saying because it sounds good. That was debated over 20 years ago, um, and pushed as an ideology. So, to understand the context and the background of all of those things, it's so important. In the name of that, I just want to talk about a few reasons why Susan was talking about gender and why that being bracketed was such an alarming thing. Um, for anybody who is maybe confused as to why this is such a big deal, coming from a maternal feminist perspective, we're there to protect women and to protect mothers, which ultimately leads on to protecting the family. When we can't define something, you really can't protect it. On an international level, it's a war over rhetoric. And when you can't define something, you cannot protect it or even implement it into any treaties or any UN documents. They'll push it aside. So that's why this is so important to define these things. I also wanted to talk about how, just like how you were so marginalized by this group at the beginning. Um, and you had this woman from Honduras. Can you remind me her name?
Marta
Maria.
Costco.
Marta. And she was like alarmed, like, what is happening? And we're talking about how Susan is this beacon of light for the pro family movement, how she started 30 years ago. But something that I think is so important, and really the foundation of our philosophy at Big Ocean Women, is that the family is the pillar of society. There's nothing more foundational and fundamental to a thriving society than the family. So, why is it that these ideas seem new to this group of women? Why is it that it was acceptable for you to be laughed at? And I think it's because women, especially mothers, are so busy making peanut butter jelly sandwiches and carpooling and homeschooling and changing diapers that they don't have space in these big UN spaces. Does that make sense? They don't have a seat at the table. And so, either
Does.
way,
But
mm-hmm,
there are problems with women throughout the world. There
mm-hmm,
are women who are not treated properly.
yeah,
And so eh, they are trying to be able to be treated appropriately. For example, in the language in the Beijing Platform for Action, it
mm-hmm,
talks about how a woman who's married, I actually would have to find the words, and maybe I should, that marital rape, it's against marital rape. And I thought, oh my goodness, marital rape, how are you going to define marital rape? Well, I went to Kenya. We spent 4 years in Kenya. And the problem there is if a man is unfaithful to his wife and he's going out and having relationships with other women, she can't stay with him because he'll bring home AIDS. And so I've known women that have had to leave their families and they couldn't take care of their families. They didn't have the ability to do that. But it was if they stayed, they would get AIDS and die. And they did. And a lot of children were left and with their grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. It was a terrible thing. And there are, I know in some countries where if the husband decides he wants to marry someone else and the wife doesn't like it and so they divorce her, uh, the children go with the mother of the husband, not with the wife. So there are some very real problems that women from some of these other countries are very concerned about, which we're not, because we don't have that kind of a situation. We have a very open and uh, accepting of women in our society. But in the
That came through the feminist fight, and I think that's why maternal feminism is this beautiful middle ground where we can come together, because all of these hard-won victories came at a cost, and it came from women organizing, came from women standing their ground. And I mean, being able to own land, being able to open a bank account, being able to vote, those things came through organization and through a feminist movement. And many, many women throughout the world are just at the very dawn of their emancipation from a lot of these things. And so we still need feminism to work. But the way that we're doing it is it needs to be more intentional on motherhood, because
children,
mothers are the ones that are, we're the ones creating the rising generation, instilling values, instilling ideas and thoughts, and all of these things. And if we can't protect, like you said, Grace, if the language isn't there that we could even begin to advocate for motherhood, then we don't have a shot at true emancipation in the long term, because we're going to be divorcing ourselves and severing off the very foundational things that should be incredibly empowering to women. Our families should never be something that hold us down. If they do, then there's a problem there that we need to fix as a society. It's all of our prerogative. It's in all of our best interest to do so. That's why maternal feminism truly is the movement of the future, in my personal opinion. I think if we really want to solve things, then that's where we go.
Absolutely. And my point before is saying, like, we get asked a lot, why are we going to the UN? What's the point? And I feel like this is a really good example. It's because we are in this place of privilege. Like, this is what I'm getting at. This woman in Honduras who is shocked by these things. Not every mom who's so busy being a mom has the opportunity to go and do this. So it almost seems like we're a minority, as if we aren't the foundation of society. But because Big Ocean Women has the privilege of knowing people like Susan Roylance, because Susan Roylance has had the opportunity to go and have the grit and the generosity to keep showing up over and over, it seems like we're a minority. But in a privileged...
what we are too is we're a light on a hill. And I have really noticed at the UN that the security guards become very acquainted with pro-family women. And you'll notice if you're there for a few days, you'll notice that they just usher us right in. They get to where they know who we are. We have a light on our face. We're happy. And in fact, I wrote an article in Beijing that says, "What good is empowerment if you're miserable?" So, and sometimes that's what happens is women become so focused on power that they forget where true happiness is in their family. So it's interesting. We really
An
are.
interesting comeback, I think, in society where a lot of women are. I think we've come to a point generally where we're understanding what life is all about. We're reevaluating it. I think younger generations definitely, like, do I really want to be in this rat race? Like, is that what it's really about? Or is it about time? Is time the ultimate commodity that I have to give, or do I want to keep that? Whether it's, you and your dog hiking a mountain as a millennial, or whether it's you, choosing to settle down and have a family and spend time with your children. Like, we're starting to understand what the point of life is, and that is to build relationships, to be mentally stable and happy and at peace internally, and all of these intangibles. Whereas I think in the 80s and 90s, it was like a race to the top, like climb the career corporate ladder. And I think there's a rejection of that now. And so I think that it's fertile ground for us to share this message of family. Like, you know, I think that there's nothing that's more fulfilling. And a lot of times, I'm just going to throw this out there too. Like, we forget about human development. And so we get stuck in this youth power kind of struggle. And we don't realize that there will come a time in our lives that will be, the sunset of our lives where we're going to developmentally be in a state of despair or of generativity. Like, that is developmental, human reality. And what do we have to give to the next generation? Who have we surrounded ourselves with? Are the people around us, are these loving relationships, or have I just lived for myself, just to pursue my own interests in a selfish manner? And so it's like we're starting to really grapple with what it means to be human. What does it mean to be happy? What is really important in life? And I would just ask whatever listeners are out there to consider, the maternal feminist paradigm is that relationships are what it's about, and building harmonious relationships between the sexes, between men and women, to create stable families and then societies. Like, that is the solution that we're just trying to share with the world. And I think that it's fertile ground now that I think people are open to that message.
It's about the children a lot. It really, mothers are the future. Mothers create the future. And when a lot of people think they get to these powerful positions, that's going to make a difference in the future, it's really not where it's at. It's with the mothers. In the European Union, I don't know exactly what their laws are now, but I've been told that they have a law that 70% of the women, they want to have 70% of the women in the workforce. So what do they do with the children? And it's interesting, different countries have done different things. In Germany, they have really focused on building up daycare centers, really nice daycare centers. And they take the children and they raise them from the time they're small in these daycare centers. Now in France, back when I studied this, France was providing money that if the woman wanted to stay home, they would get some money for staying home so that they didn't have to go into a daycare. So there are different ways. Some of them are dealing with these issues, but mothers are the best for their children. I as you know, I ran for Congress, and I can tell you, my sister helped and other people helped, and they weren't my children's mother. So before I got through, I was really glad I didn't win, but I almost did. But I learned a lot, and that's how United Families got started, is because of what I learned back in 1978 about the world and what we could do about it. I learned a lot of techniques and the kinds of things that can help us to be successful.
Yeah, it's
I love
important.
the conversation. For those of you who are listening, you probably can't tell, but I think one reason that we're going back to this generational wealth of wisdom is because in this conversation alone, we're in 3 different generations. I'm in my young 20s, just got married. I don't have kids. Susan has how many great grandchildren do you have, Susan?
Well, I have 18 greats.
18 great
I have
grandchildren.
34 grandchildren, but I have 18 great grandchildren. Just a couple of them were just born in the last month, which has been fun.
I
Another
love
one on the way, we just found out.
Oh,
Wanted,
congratulations.
wanted a baby for a long time, and she's finally pregnant. So that's nice.
Awesome. That's
Good.
wonderful.
I love how seamlessly we're able to have these conversations. Um, so I want to talk about this recent event. This is one of those that Susan said, I'm done. I'm not going to anymore. And then she's like, hey, I'm going to Geneva to another conference. We're like, okay, Susan, take notes. So we want to talk about Geneva. There was a workshop on the family hosted by the Human Rights Council. And I want to of course, hear about your experience of being able to go to the conference, because that's kind of a fun story. And then some of your main takeaways. And I want to keep us focused on how the family is the solution to a lot of these big, overly complicated issues that the UN is like saying that these issues are very complicated. Seems like the people at the top are like, we need all these new programs and all these artificial solutions. And then us at Big Ocean Women, we're like, the solution is the family. It always has been. Like, turn to your roots. It's very simple, actually. Um, so that's something that we've seen time and time again. So, Susan, let's talk about your experience at Geneva. Tell us, how did you get there?
It's one of those things I don't know that I can even remember how I found out about it, but it was a workshop on the family part, sponsored by the Human Rights Council. And a lot of family issues do go through the Human Rights Council. And I tried to find people that would be interested in going with me, but everybody was doing something else. And so I finally just decided to go. And it was, I hadn't prepared for very long, so it was kind of an interesting thing. Well, when before I left, I finally did get approval, and it was kind of a different process than we'd used before. But I had the thing to wear on my badge and everything when I got there. And then when I got there, I woke up and turned on my computer, and it said, "You've been rejected." So I wasn't supposed to be able to go. I thought, "Oh, here I am in Geneva, and I can't even go to this conference." And the reason was because in Geneva, it's a separate part of the UN, even though it is the UN. And yeah, although I have a grounds pass to the UN in New York, I didn't have an automatic pass in Geneva unless my organization was properly registered with Geneva. Well, it wasn't. They decided it wasn't. I don't know why it shouldn't have been, but they decided it wasn't, and they weren't going to let me come. And so I was really scrambling to try and figure out what to do, and I did know that Latter-day Saint Charities did have an office in Geneva, and I knew that they did represent themselves or they did go to conferences. So I contacted Ryan Coe, who's in the New York office, and he wrote a letter to let me go. Well, he couldn't do it either because he wasn't the one that was the main one in Geneva. So that guy was just leaving. But anyway, we got the letter, and I was able to represent Latter-day Saint Charities, which they're highly respected in Geneva because the LDS Church has been contributing to some of the programs, the education programs, and some of the poverty programs. And so they were very happy to have me speak. I kind of knew the process of being able to get on the list to be able to speak. And so I actually was able to give an intervention in all three of the four sessions. And the fourth one, I actually wrote it. But Anna, who is a representative of Latter-day Saint Charities on a kind of a full-time basis, gave that one in French. So she took what I'd written and did it in French. But for example, the first one was on violence. The second one was on education. The third one was on employment and being able to provide for families. And then the fourth one was on poverty. And I don't know if you've seen in our book on the family capital of the SDGs, there's an article in there by Professor Raje from BYU about the importance of fathers. And so that was what was presented in that one. But each one of them, we focused on some things that really, if we did those things, would make a difference. It's not just talking about it; it would really make a difference. And so that was a really neat experience. Before we got through, they knew who I was because we
Awesome.
participated a lot.
That's terrific. I think the solutions that we're trying to share are cultural ones that I think, in many times, different policies that come from the top down try to kind of strong arm people into compliance without really changing people's ideas and perceptions and hearts on things. And so that's why I'm much more for culturally based solutions because I think they last longer. I think that people will adopt attitudes and behaviors that reflect their attitudes that will outlast, whatever changing policy may come. And I think that having that voice from nonprofits at the grassroots like ours is really critical. And I do value the UN for creating spaces where those, ideas can be shared and where they want
We come
feedback
together.
from nonprofits. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
pretty cool that the UN does that. For all that I complain about the United Nations and their global agenda, I do value that they create a space at least for us to share and give feedback. So whether they listen, I don't know, but
yeah. Actually, from a real perspective of policy, CSW is not the most important thing.
mm,
But because women are attracted to it and feel like a need that should be that women should be represented, there's more people come to that session than there is to anything else in the whole year.
mhm.
And women come, small groups in foreign countries and villages. They save up their money so they can come to the UN for the Commission on the Status of Women. And I just love being able to talk to the women there. It's just a lot of times they'll wear their native dress, and it's just a real precious experience. And Big Ocean Women has been excellent at being able to enfold some of these women into their organization and help, sometimes even with just little things that have made a big difference in their villages.
Yeah, yeah. We've loved to go and attend CSW. It's been going on 11 years now that we've been going, and the friendships that we've made have really lasted years, and
Yeah.
different projects and different things, and those really creative solutions that come only from women, meeting together with other women, coming up with solutions and networking and figuring that out. It's really amazing. So those are the kind of grassroots solutions that I'm all about. I think so much can come from that. So it's such a joy. Yeah.
I would say beyond friendship, it's a sisterhood. So many
Mhm.
of the women that we've met there, um, lifelong sisterhood. It's called
Mhm.
sisterhood, and it
Women,
really.
women who have values,
Mhm.
who want to teach their children values, and they really do want to make a difference for good in the world, and they recognize that their children can do that. They're there all over the world. And
Mhm.
when they come together, there's those who are pushing to break the glass ceiling, and that's all they're really for. But it's interesting when they bring people together from all over the world, there really is a strong pro motherhood family feeling. And so as we come together, it strengthens all of us. I think it's a wonderful experience for
I
good.
think I think it's really like just to put words and language to it. We do represent a majority of the women of the world. Like I've said it a million times, a majority of the women of the world are women of faith, women who are deeply connected to family, and women who value motherhood, to whom motherhood is important to them. Whether or not the rest of the world sees it that way, that's what our mission is. We need to change that perception. And if it's not empowering to women, then there's a problem. But for a majority of the women, this is the case. And we don't have a philosophical home to belong to. And that's why our movement is so important. We would love any listeners out there, if any of this resonates with you, if you both have your foot in feminism, meaning you want to elevate and empower women wherever they are, and motherhood, that those things are important to you. The maternal feminism is a perfect marriage of those two ideas. And we walk a fine line between these two warring concepts. And it can't be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We invite you to use that language. I am a maternal feminist. That is your number one advocacy thing that you need to do today, is use that language.
But feminization of poverty is probably the biggest problem in the world, because there's a lot of women who have children and they don't have husbands to help them. And the children do better if they are born into a married biological family where both of their biological parents are married. And that's something we can represent. Really and truly, that would solve more problems in the world if all the children were born into married biological families. And
The
so,
social sciences is totally clear about that, by the way. Like, we're not just speaking from thin air. Like, the social sciences over and over and over again claim that this is true. Like, the feminization of poverty is 100%, Susan. And when you have a committed father and husband at home who wants to um, support his family, it's
so
children born into that household are light years ahead and privileged in every single way, every single factor.
the latest language, in fact, this came up a lot in Geneva, is leave no one behind. That's part of, well, it was part of the 2030 agenda. It's part of anyway, documents in the recent ones. They've used leave no one behind because they try to bring these gender ideology, different things into the fold with that phrase. Well, if you want to leave no one behind, if you want children to have the greatest advantage in their life, you want to make sure they're born into a biological married parent family. And we need to promote that because that's the true solutions to the world. Almost all of the things, violence is not a problem as much. If the parents are married, they're not cohabitating. There's so many of those situations. The first one this session was on violence, and that is truly one of the best things you can do to solve the violence problem, to solve the The education problem, if the parents are involved, the kids do better. If you're trying to solve the employment problem, if the husband is helping to take care of the family so the mother doesn't have to spend all of her time trying to care for the family, it makes a huge difference. So that's really the solutions. If we can just get people to recognize, if you want all children to not be left behind, we need to really promote marriage.
I'm really glad that you brought up that phrase. That was one that I was going to bring up. That was one that when we were debriefing about your experiences in Geneva, that one really stood out to me. Leave no one behind. And how they're coming up with all of these government programs and new policies to try to account for everybody. And we have other episodes that talk about some of the data collection and some of the dangers that are attached in the fine print of all of that. And what is almost comedic to us at Big Ocean is we're like, the family accounts for everybody. Everybody has a family. Like, that is the organic way to leave nobody behind. It is biologically impossible to not have a family, right? In one way or another.
Internalize those words and learn how to communicate. We need some talking points and different things because that's their big talking point right now. And really, their way of doing it does leave people behind. So it's important.
Well,
Yeah.
it not only just leaves people behind, you become a number on a massive spreadsheet. You don't have a name, you don't have an individuality, you don't have a personality, you don't like nobody will know you the way that a family can know you for all of your goodness and wholeness. And one thing I did want to say is that there is domestic violence within households and there is abuse and these things, families are broken. Like that is the reality, but it doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. That saying, no, it's worth preserving. It's worth fixing. It's worth working through. It's worth giving additional supports to husbands and to wives and to have, marriage support, to keep families intact, to show parents, what good, healthy relationships look like at home. That's where the social support network needs to be focused on, not just in tossing it out and saying that it's an archaic institution and that we can go without. We literally have nothing else. Like the replacement of that organic system is really alarming. Like if that is the end goal is to replace the family, like that is something that should be alarming every single human being on the planet. Because this is what we have. This is who we are. It's what it means to be human. And so if there's another agenda that is trying to eradicate that, then that's something that we really have to look at and be really honest with. Like, what is it then?
I realized quite early on that the women who are pushing all those things at the UN are miserable because they've had bad family experiences. And so that's why we need to be a light on the hill. We need to be able to go and show that families can be happy and families can be successful. And there's just so much data that shows that if you're not in a married biological family, all of the problems are so much greater. But sometimes some people do get kind of left dropped out of the through the cracks and they become the ones that are anti-family. So it's our job to help them realize that there can be good families. It can be the solution, and we just need to promote it and show how it can be done.
Yeah. The government has tried. They've tried to create social programs that fix the family or supplement the family, and they just don't work. The only sustainable solution, the only thing that is multicultural, multi-generational is the family.
And I think that a beautiful thing to go along with that is that healing the family in its brokenness in whatever ways that we're looking at it is possible. Like healing is possible. And it's worth it to not let go of people and to hold on to those who are struggling and to find ways to reach out and to not let people fall through the cracks within the family scope because that's how you heal. You heal parts of yourself when you are not giving up on others. I think that and the beautiful thing about families is that two people may have a really rocky relationship, but because the family is like this grandmothers, grandfathers, aunties, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews. Yeah, it's like there's other people that can hold things together, and together we can heal. And I think healing is what we're really after. It's not to throw away and toss out and replace, it's to fix and mend what's been broken and to heal. And I think that we need to be talking about healing a whole lot more at the UN level. But what I'm finding is a quite a transhumanist approach of replacing with these other artificial systems. And I feel like that's definitely not the direction we need to go.
The other thing is that we need to help our young women, especially, think that families are important, that realize the great value of a mother and to desire to have a family. There's a lot of young women now that don't even desire that because they either they haven't, well, they've just had a different goal set before them, and the things that they've been searching for are not the kind that really brings true happiness. And we somehow need to be helping. In fact, I have to tell you a funny story. I was I had a podcast I was supposed to be speaking on. I was trying to think of what we could do to help our young women want to be mothers and to realize that what a special thing that is. And so I hooked into AI and I asked the question, what kinds of things can we do to help young women want to be mothers? And I got back a really nice list of 10 things and et cetera. And then I said, no, I just want 6 talking points for this podcast that I can use kind of on a, a human communication level. And I got the next one I got back, and part of the talking points told about my being in Beijing, which I hadn't said that at all. Told me about me being in Beijing, and I guess they knew it was me because of probably my name on my computer. And anyway, it quoted a phrase from my book, and it gave the name of the book and everything. It was my book, but the quote is not in my book. It's, I looked really, and it isn't there. I
You're
went
like,
back.
it was good though. Maybe I could include it in my in the second edition.
It really wasn't the best. And I says, where did you get that quote? It's not in my book. And so then it searched, and it says, you're right, it's not. And
That happens a lot.
it represented the things that you stand for. Like, oh, isn't that interesting that that's what AI gave?
Yeah. I think one way that young women are really being moved today is simply we have a lot, like through social media, women are just sharing the beautiful aspects of their life, like tiny little snippets of their day, cuddling a brand new newborn, breastfeeding, playing with their children, making dinner, just these things that are mundane, but that you can just feel from the video or feel from, the environment, this peace. And there was a really powerful article. I think it was like a New York Times article. Don't quote me on that, but it was that, this phenomenon happening with these career-driven 20-somethings that had gone to school and were professional working in their careers. And they would come home and they would just watch these mothers with their children, organizing this space and decorating this and baking a cake. A lot of really mundane things, but that's what they would crave at the end of a busy workday. Well, and I think that the more that we share the beauty of relationships, the more it touches people's hearts. And the more I think we were just built that way with this inner desire to find connection, to find peace, to find harmony within relationships. And I think the more that we promote that, the more that we actually live authentic lives and we try to heal our own families, like you said, time and again, Susan, a light on a hill, we can't help but shine. And it attracts people. People just see happy children and it just sparks joy in them. And they're like, oh, I think one day maybe I want to be like that, But it starts girls thinking. But I will say there's a very active force happening at the UN this past CSW. I sat in a session that was really eye-opening where there is a very well-funded and well-organized machine that's trying to attract girls as young as 12 to, in their teens to become radicalized and activists for everything that I'd say like second generation feminism toes. So it's like the, free access abortion and all of these different things that I think in the end developmentally, like I talked about, in the broader scheme of human development, brings women a whole lot of heartache, whole lot of mental anguish, to be left alone without branches or roots. And I think that as mothers who have branches and have roots, meaning we have children and a posterity, and we're deeply anchored to our, our ancestors and our foremothers that have come before us, that we need to be a more active and intentional influence for good for these young girls, to say, hold up, don't make that decision quite yet. It's not quite what it's cut out to be. Just listen to your inner compass. Listen to what that voice is telling you inside of you. Don't shun that away. And just because they're getting these big, Hollywood moguls to come and promote this stuff, don't buy into it yet. Just be still and listen and guide your life according to your own internal compass, is what we talk about a lot at Big Ocean. But I do think that there's a rising generation that's figuring this out a lot sooner, that it's about relationships and it's about inner peace, and families at the core of that. So
I'll just add that I see that definitely amongst my generation, and it brings me so much joy. Something else I'm seeing is men who are also like, we're talking about how important it is for men to be in the home. As women are like, I'm feeling burnout from corporate rat race. Like, I actually want to homestead and have a garden and, get out of this society that turns out hasn't been serving me this whole time. And I thought it was my dream to like contribute, but they're actually just using me like they've used people forever. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast episode. But I'm also seeing a lot more men getting into like homeschooling their kids, men wanting to be
Yes,
home
yes.
and getting in.
In 95, that was a really strange concept of men getting more involved with their children. And because some of the discussions over the language in the document, some of these men would just laugh, because they talk a lot about equality of women and men.
But as women continue to
has
turn
really improved.
and choose the family relationships, men have the opportunity to do the same, and it ends up serving everybody. That's the power of the family. When one person fosters a relationship, everybody benefits. And that's the solution that we're trying to promote through Big Ocean. This is what Susan has been on her soapbox for 50 years talking about this. This is the best solution for everybody involved. It only benefits everybody.
I remember what I was going to say. Economically, we are having problems in this country and many other countries because women are not having children. And
yeah,
the
demographic winter is happening.
it really is happening. And the thing that's really interesting is very hard once women decide not to have children or not to have more children. It's really hard to turn that around. If they don't decide they want to have children before they have them, the chances are they won't change that. And governments have been trying all over the world to try and get women to want to have children. I remember when I was in Russia, they had these billboards about having the third child. They were really pushing the third child, like Yuri Gagarin, who was a spaceman, he was a third child. And so it's also economic.
If you can have a third child, you can have a bunch more. The third is the hardest. Grab number.
I remember when I
Just have a bunch more. It's easy after that.
you got help after that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is a really important economic problem. If a country doesn't have a rising workforce, they're in trouble.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to promote policy that supports the family rather than replacing the family.
Yeah.
And a great conversation, Susan. I loved it.
Well, I loved it too. I love both of you have great input. It was really a sweet experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.